listening to the Multiply podcast. I'm Carson Sampson from MBCM, that's Mennonite Brethren Church of Manitoba.
And I am Sarah Fraze from MB Mission, that's Mennonite Brethren Mission.
And Carla Brown of the MB Herald, which is the Mennonite Brethren Herald, your friendly neighborhood bi-monthly magazine.
I've always seen you a little bit like Spider-Man, because you work in the realm of journalism and, publication. Although I don't know that
Superman do that too?
Yes, he did. It's a pretty common thing. Yeah, and for a superhero to work in a newspaper or magazine, in a publishing realm. And someone just mentioned to me 5 minutes before we came in here to record that Carla wore a cape to work today. I didn't see it. I have no proof of it. Only she can confirm that.
This will remain unconfirmed. There's no photos. We can't publish them with the podcast, so it'll remain an unverified mystery.
Well, since
you might have gotten caught in the wheels in this book.
That would have been a dangerous. You don't want that scenario to play out. Keep your scarf tucked within your coat. Yeah, scarf, your cape. Yeah. Did I say scarf?
There was a woman. What was her name? Isadora something. This actress woman who wore scarves all the time.
Yeah.
Who actually perished from having her scarf get caught up in the spokes of her motorcycle.
Oh, man. Let's look that one up.
This is not a joke. This actually happened.
Yeah. So all the more reason to keep your cape tucked in.
That's a sad story.
Just
and
Google that one for me.
Squirrels out of the spokes as well.
Ugh.
Did you hear about the city councilor in Chicago? He was on the radio talking about his hatred of squirrels, and then the squirrel ran into his bike and caused him to crash.
And of course, it probably looked pretty bad for him.
Did he survive the squirrel crash?
He did.
Are you asking about the council, the council guy, or the squirrel? Who are you referring to?
The council guy.
The squirrel did not survive.
Okay, just getting back to the topic of career choices, that being either a superhero or in journalism, whatever that might be. I was on the internet, the trusted source of all things true and accurate, just a little while ago. And Global News put out a story just a couple years back that states half of Canadians stay in jobs for 2 years. 2 years. And some further research dug up that 30% Canadians spend more than 4 years in a job. And I think about 20 years ago in the 90s, that was 60%. It was double that number. So it's kind of a big deal to spend any real significant time in one place, in one job. The trend nowadays is to job hop. I think that's a thing. I've been here for 3 years, which is not all that significant. And I've been freelancing for over 10, but I don't even know if that counts. So we won't count it. But we have two anomalies in our presence today. The first being Carla Brown. How long have you been with the Canadian Conference of Mennonite Brethren Churches?
I do believe it will be 9 years in July.
9 years. And then the gentleman I had the pleasure of sitting down with for today's interview, our conference pastor, Keith Poysti, has been in that position for over 11 years. So by today's standards, those numbers, 9, 11, are almost unheard of. So kudos to you. Fantastic. I did have an opportunity to spend just about an hour just chit-chatting and talking shop with one of the coolest guys I know. So let's just get right into it. Okay. How do you feel about that for an icebreaker? Nice and smooth. There you go. Okay. Sitting down with Keith Poysti, who's been for the past 11 plus years MBCM's conference pastor. I've been wanting to do this for weeks, for months, and I'm glad we're finally able to do it. Thanks, Keith.
You're welcome. Good to be here, Carson.
Sweet. I want to start way back. Like, tell me what it was like for kid Keith. Like, what was it like growing up for you?
Kid Keith was very
tall,
interesting, chaotic, and lively upbringing. My father was a missionary all his life, and grew up as a missionary kid. So that means we ended up moving every 3 years on average, all my growing up years. And it wasn't just from house to house or, city to city, even country to country. It was between Europe and the US and we made many trips cross-Atlantically. So yeah, it was very interesting. Got to visit many different countries. Lived in one of the most beautiful places in the world on the southern coast of France, in Monaco. Went to school with Prince Albert I, the reigning Prince of Monaco. So it was a very interesting upbringing.
No kidding. Where were you born?
I was born in Pasadena, California.
Okay. And so your parents are American too, or?
My parents are American. They're no longer living.
Yeah.
My dad was called, when I was quite young, to be a Russian radio broadcaster. He was called actually the Billy Graham of Russia, because this was during the communist era, when the only way they could receive the good news, excuse me, was through shortwave radio. And my dad had a listening audience of upwards of 20 million people at one time. So yeah, he was very well known, and he always said that his second family was the people of Russia.
Unbelievable, 20 million people. I think we have a listenership of about 20 people, so it's a little off of that number, but you're handling it like a pro. You wouldn't know, but you were in front of 20 million people doing your dad's radio show. That must have been a lot of, like, you had a lot to live up to. Like, did you feel at a very young age that you were sort of called to be the next Billy Graham on the radio, or to definitely at least be in ministry of some sort, or did that not come to you until a bit later?
Well, my dad tried to get all of us involved in missionary radio, and I, for years I was the technical director for his recording studio, etc. But God has different callings on different people's lives, and yeah, from the early age of 5 or 6, I felt like I wanted to work in some kind of full-time ministry. Didn't know what, but I definitely had a call. My dad was an evangelist, so how can you listen to an evangelist day in and day out and not respond to the call of God? Pretty hard.
Yeah, I can imagine. So at about 5 years old, you felt the calling, and what did you like? What were your next steps? You don't apply for seminary at 5 years old, but this sort of lingered for quite a while. And what was it like for you as a student? And going from all over the place, and knowing you kind of have this destiny, this calling.
Yeah, the call is always in the background, but I was a normal teenager. I loved to goof off, and in fact, I probably goofed off way too much in school. Didn't really apply myself, and just wanted to breeze through life. So I was a middle child, and middle children, tend to want to evade responsibility. But eventually I went to Moody Bible Institute, and there had some, real choices to make, whether I wanted to work with people or with, like the technical side of radio, for example. So I went through the missionary radio technology program, and then decided in my last year that I wanted to work with people.
Okay. Now, so you worked on the technical side of radio, and I know you well, and I know that that would imply, but I know you a little better than that, to know that the music would have had a big impact on you throughout the years. So back up a little bit before Moody. What kind of stuff did you listen to as a younger kid?
Well, I grew up in the 70s, so this was the rock and roll era, and I was a normal teenager. I loved Eric Clapton and Santana and all the Yes. I went to some Yes concerts in Chicago and everything. So I just loved, the whole progressive rock scene and rock. It was not the lifestyle, but I loved the music.
Yeah. And are you a musician? Do you play something? Do you sing?
No, I love singing worship songs and always have, but no, my wife Heidi is the one with the musical gifts. I don't have those.
So the road to Moody, can you tell me a little bit more about what that looked like and how you got there? How did you decide on Moody and what's that look like?
Well, my older brother, John, preceded me. He was 2 years ahead of me and went to Moody. And, he kept on telling me that, this is a good school, a good place to go. So I entered actually the same program he did, just followed in his footsteps. And it was actually one of the neatest experiences of my life. John and I, we had some tussles in our family life. We were so close in age, very different people. And so we had some conflicts. But when I came to Moody, he was there to greet me on the front steps of the school and said, welcome here, and I hope that we're going to have a good friendship. And we ended up actually rooming together. It was a neat experience of reconciliation and friendship.
Excellent. And so where were mom and dad living at this point? You were away from home. Now, is this the first time we've been away from home?
Yes. I basically left home at the age of 17 and then went to Moody, like I was 18 at Moody. My parents were living in Austria at the time. Okay. And before I came to Moody, I was running their studio in Austria.
And so your brother must have finished ahead of you? Like he graduated from Moody ahead of you, probably?
Yes, he was 2 years ahead of me.
Right. And so what were the Moody years like? I keep imagining, the independence of youth and running off to college and sort of living this new phase of life. Because to put it into perspective, I went to the University of Manitoba and I lived at home for part of that. I never really had sort of like that independence of, being shipped off or taking off and living in a dorm, living with roommates and experiencing that kind of college experience. But for you, having some time with your brother and then I'm sure sometime even with more independence, what was that like? I'm not looking for wild stories of, wild frivolity, but I'm just curious to see how it would have been. You've been all over the place already. You probably adjusted to travel, moving and being uprooted, but here you were sort of still far from home, in that
Very
sense.
Far.
Yeah.
Moody's an interesting place. It's right downtown Chicago. It's about a mile off of the Magnificent Mile. Michigan Avenue, and from the John Hancock Tower and the Sears Tower, like these huge buildings. The dorm itself was 19 stories. We were on the 16th floor, and so you got 19 floors of guys. There's obviously a lot of life going on there, but it was a safe environment. There were rules. There were, and most of all, there were teachers who really believed in what they were doing. So my favorite courses there were the theology courses. I remember some of the profs there who were really believing in what they did and what they taught. I got involved also in audiovisual support. I had to have jobs throughout my time there. So I worked with some really great guys in the audiovisual department. They, invited me to their home during holidays because, my parents were in Europe. I wasn't going to go back.
You didn't go home for the holidays, right?
I didn't go there. I went home for summer break, but apart from that, I was long way from home.
Yeah.
So there are a lot of supports. I played sports, coming from Europe. I played soccer, and I was on the soccer team my entire 4 years, and had some great friendships, on sports teams.
What was church involvement like while you were a student? Did you have a home church and some responsibilities as a part of that, or were you already busy enough with seminary?
Growing up as a missionary kid, you don't have a home church. So what I did is I ended up finding churches in Chicago. And Chicago is a very interesting place because they have all these different church experiences. Many of them were experimental and novel, like Reba Place and LaSalle Street Community Church right down the street. Fantastic church experiences. And then there's the big Moody Church, the one that D.L. Moody founded. Warren Wiersbe from Back to the Bible was the pastor there for a time. So I've got excellent teaching. And then plus, you have chapel every day, and very interesting, speakers there. Not that I always paid attention, but it sank in that, your life is, you're now preparing for a life of service. And that was why I was there. So I just didn't know how I was going to serve. That needed to be yet revealed. But I knew that I was preparing to offer my life to serve God in whatever way He wanted.
So at this point, you didn't know, there wasn't a clear indication that your future meant pastor at this church, or that you would be a pastor in any form. You just knew it was a life of ministry. So was there an aha moment? Was there some sort of point of clarity where you realized, okay, the future's become far more clear for me now, and I'm going to pastor? That kind of thing happened?
Well, at Moody, we had these different Christian service opportunities. And I remember one where we had to go to the maximum security jail, Cook County Jail in Chicago. So here you are, preaching in this barred alcove to these hardened criminals who, when you came there, would turn up the TV so they didn't have to listen to you. And I thought, man, I am never going to be a preacher. I am so bad at this. If you would have said, oh, Keith, you're going to become a pastor later in life, I would have just laughed you out of the room. It was not even in the remotest way in my mind.
Right. But something must have happened here. Like, you're speaking at this prison and you're like, no, I'm not a pastor. Forget it. This is not what I'm going to be. I can't preach. Nobody's listening to me, and this is not my environment. Something must have changed.
Well, something did change. Yeah. I married this beautiful Mennonite girl, Mennonite Brethren girl, actually, who came from St. Catharines, Ontario. And since I was a missionary kid and, I wasn't about to bring this girl that I got engaged to Austria or wherever my parents were living. And I had no fixed abode, and we weren't going to live in Chicago. She was Canadian. Yeah. So we ended up getting married in St. Catharines, Ontario, and looking for a church there.
St. Catharines, Ontario. There's no better place. So when you met Heidi, was that right off the bat upon, like your first year at Moody, or did you? I'd like to just know a little bit more about how and when you met her.
Yeah, it was my second year at Moody.
Okay.
And my roommate, Don, at that point actually had his eye on Heidi, and so he introduced me to her, and the rest is history.
Sorry, Don. Yeah, didn't work out for
Don.
you. Yeah.
So was from then on, she went back and did nurses training. So for a whole year, we corresponded by letter. We wrote a letter a day. That was our commitment.
Amazing. Yeah, it wasn't an email.
No. This was longhand. No computers, no typewriters.
It's very romantic, though.
Well, there were typewriters.
But this is way more romantic. The handwritten long form letter.
Oh yeah. How many times can you fit "I love you" in a letter?
Yeah.
So that was very formational for us. And then we got married in 1977 and started having a family. And we went to her church and just found it, not outreach oriented enough, not missional enough. So we ended up living in Niagara Falls, and there was this small mission church that was, they had a church planter, Dick and Sharon Hill, where the church planters, they'd gone to Mennonite Brethren Biblical Seminary, and we just loved what they were doing. They had outreach clubs for kids, and it was a rapidly growing little church, and I became the moderator of the church at 25 and was preaching and teaching, and so that's where the aha moments started.
Right. Yeah, this is much different than your experience in the prison. Like, Yes, things were falling together here, coming together in a way that everything seemed right.
Absolutely, I found that people weren't turning up the TV to drown me out. They were actually listening, and they actually liked my leadership and encouraged me. I had some negative encouragement too. Like one lady said, Keith, when she found out that I wanted more training, wanted to go to seminary, says, Keith, you'll make a good teacher, but you'll never be a pastor. So just watch out what kind of words we say to each other.
And think about the effect, the long-lasting effect that's going to have on somebody, right?
Exactly.
You're remembering that today, even though, it didn't dissuade you from becoming a pastor, but it certainly had a lasting impact. The words we choose and the words we decide to hold back, what a world of difference it would make if we just took a second or two to think twice.
Yeah, and what's obvious is God's call is way stronger than people's words.
Thank goodness. Yeah.
If they're death words, like you just say, well, I guess God showed that person. Right. That's not the final word. God has the final word. So I'll tell you what happened for the final word, how I actually got into pastoral ministry. So while we were in seminary, I became involved as a youth group leader in a church because, I needed a job there to make ends meet. Yeah. And it was beyond a job. I was the youth pastor, and Heidi was the one who organized everything, and I, did the Bible studies and spoke. And we had kind of like a mini revival going with the youth of this church. And it was a United Methodist church, and more people were coming, and all these, different kinds of young people. They were mainly very rich, spoiled kids who were looking for God. And so in addition to Bible studies, they had a compassionate streak. We decided to join this guy named Pastor Vaughn from San Diego. He started a ministry. He was tired of just ordinary youth ministry and wanted to do compassionate ministry with youth. Mm-hmm. So he would take youth groups down to Tijuana, Mexico, across the border, to Rosarita, to different orphanages, and would delouse kids, would play sports with them, bring food. And so we joined him for one of those meetings or one of those outings, and it was fantastic. It was eye-opening. And a lot of these youth were deeply touched, and they ended up continuing those yearly trips down to Mexico. Mm-hmm. But as we were driving home, we had to drive through LA, and there was a detour, and this detour was going to take us right past the Claremont Graduate School, where I was intent on taking another 5 years of education so I could become a scholar and teacher in Old Testament. And I didn't quite have peace about that direction, but that's all the direction I had. So I was just moving in that direction, preparing to go there. So this detour took us, our van of our motley crew of about a dozen youth, all dirty and everything from ministry. We had just visited a Tijuana dump city, and so here we were going to go right past Claremont Graduate School. So I asked them, do you guys want to see where I'm going to school next year, And so they said, yeah, we want to see where Pastor Keith's going to school. So we went into this Claremont Graduate School, and it is gorgeous. I mean, you talk about ivory tower in the best sense of the word. This is where you would study to become a scholar. Manicured lawns and paneled offices and libraries, and it was just gorgeous. So here I am sitting on the lawn with these, quite dirty, disheveled youth, all happy from their ministry. And I thought, I want to be a pastor. I want to do this. I don't want to sit for 5 more years studying the Old Testament when I could be ministering to youth and adults. So God gave me clarity right there and peace. Came home, told my wife, she says, great, let's do it. Going back to Canada. And within 3 months, we landed in Winnipeg.
Wow. So let me just try to get the time frame right. You mentioned earlier you were married in St. Catharines. You were also working at a church in Niagara Falls. Is this, then all of a sudden, 3 months later, you're in Winnipeg? So the stint you had in Niagara Falls, that came post-Moody and before you went to Winnipeg, or
that was pre-seminary. So
okay.
I skipped seminary, or just touched on it. No, we lived for 5 years in Niagara Falls, and I had various jobs, and my work in the church was as a layperson, but decided to go to seminary and got a Master of Arts in Biblical Studies.
And then within a few months of that day on the lawn, you found yourself in Winnipeg.
That's right.
Unbelievable how that works.
Yeah, who would have ever thought? I had visited Winnipeg once, but from Southern California to Winnipeg, it was quite a cultural adjustment, to get used to Winnipeg. I remember after 1 year of ministry in Winnipeg with the youth and the church, and, we had just been exposed to the vineyard movement and to all kinds of different ways of worshiping and ministering to people, and this just seemed like, how are we going to fit in here? Yeah.
I've heard folks say that there are similarities between Chicago and Winnipeg. Did you notice that or feel that at all, or is it a very different kind of place altogether?
Well, Winnipeg, Chicago is an industrial town.
Yeah.
It's quite, blue collar, and there is that gritty feel to it. And yes, the winters can be fairly severe.
Yeah.
It's windy as well at times, and it is called the Windy City, not because of the wind, but anyway, there are some similarities. Yeah.
Yeah. But outside of those small similarities, you were in a whole new world now.
Yes.
Completely. Once again, thrown somewhere completely different and, set free to do God's work in a strange land, just like mom and dad would have, right? It's really something.
That's right. Yeah.
So what was your first role as a pastor in Winnipeg?
I had a dual role. Started in a church in North Kildonan, and I was in charge of youth and also in charge of outreach. And so one of the things that we started was we called it Sunday Night Alive, so Saturday Night Alive.
Yeah.
And we had, worship kind of service, but mainly geared for people who were not churched.
Okay. And did you have kids of your own at this point?
Yes, 3 kids.
Yeah.
So we came with a babe in arms. Our youngest daughter was born in California, actually, while we were in seminary. And so we came to this church with 3 preschoolers. My poor wife, here I am, a starting pastor, and she's taking care of these 3 preschoolers, trying to keep them in line on Sunday morning. And yes, she deserves the biggest medal of all.
I would think so. Yeah, no kidding. And so what did it look like in the years that followed in Winnipeg? You'd had a couple of stints as a pastor, is that right? Or
yeah, I went from this church to another Winnipeg church, inner city core area church for 5.5 years as lead pastor, following the associate pastor position. And then from there, I had kind of a crisis experience at the end of my lead pastor position. I did a Jonah. I wanted to run from the pastorate. I thought I wasn't made for this. It's too hard. Can't do it. I felt like a failure. Had helped the church walk through some really difficult times, and there were new people coming to the church and everything, but I just ran out of gas.
No, okay. And so then what brought you back? Like, what reconciled that conflict and that crisis that you were experiencing?
Well, it's weird because I found out that, just because you're not in vocational ministry, if God has a call in your life, you keep on doing what you're doing. Mm-hmm. If you're true to God. So I had never abandoned God. It was just, I didn't want to be a professional or vocational pastor. And so I found out that I was doing the same thing in our neighborhood with people. There was a couple going through a divorce, so, I was ministering to them. There was somebody whose sister committed suicide. Mm-hmm. And so I was pastoring in our neighborhood.
Right.
And when a church came to call and said, we want you to be an interim pastor, and they were very persistent, I kept saying no. And finally I said, why am I saying no?
Right. Because in the meantime, you're a pastor in the neighborhood. You're a pastor day to day, from waking up to going to bed. You're fulfilling that role in one form or another.
Exactly.
It was kind of, that's the calling on your heart. You might as well admit it, own up to it, and commit to it. And so then you took a next step. What I'd like to ask, what did you find as the biggest adjustment from going the role of associate pastor then into a lead pastor role?
Well, the biggest adjustment is finding out that the buck stops here. And realizing that people are looking to you for setting direction and vision, and you can't pass that off to anyone else. You have to be intent on hearing God together with the congregation. Obviously, you involve the congregation, and this isn't just like Moses on the mountaintop, but they were expecting direction and vision from me, and I wasn't really prepared for that responsibility. Seminary had prepared me to read and study the Bible and learn to, expound exegetically on it and teach. But it didn't really prepare me for leading a congregation and all that's involved.
What do you think what's the best piece of advice you wish you had gotten when you were very young, very new pastor at that stage in your life?
That's a very good question. There's so many things in retrospect.
It's probably hard to narrow it down to one piece of advice, but feel free to expand, give me more. that's okay.
I don't think I'm unusual in this. I guess when you're a young pastor, you think you know it all.
Okay.
You think, I had to learn through difficult experiences that I didn't know it all. So I think having somebody to mentor you would be the number one thing that I would have changed then. I had different mentors, but they were always kind of distant. They weren't really, close. Even the lead pastor I worked, we worked very independently, and I could have really used a lot more guidance. So when I was leading a youth group in California, in the United Methodist Church, there the lead pastor, Alvern von Stieg, was my mentor, and that was absolutely essential. But if I would do anything differently, I would have had a very strong mentor in my life throughout my ministry, who would have had a greater role in guiding and helping prevent some of the mistakes, that I made.
Yeah, because sometimes you're your own worst enemy. And going back to what we said a few minutes ago about, watching your tongue and knowing when to speak. I will forever be guilty of thinking I know it all, or I know best, or that, my word is the authority. And it's 9 times out of 10 not true. And so I think lifelong mentorship, you need a partner or somebody to speak into your life all the way through.
Yeah, like the missionary Abe Neufeld. We worked together at one church that I pastored here. And, he recognized the impatience that was within me, the longing for God to do something great immediately. And, he would constantly say, he became a mentor for me. He would constantly say to me, like, Keith, sometimes you get places faster by going slower. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And, he would recognize that impatience and, encourage me to trust God with the journey, with his pace. It's not always my pace, and trust God with that.
So you've had a few years now in Winnipeg working as a pastor, associate lead, then again as a lead. And what brought you then to conference work?
I became involved in what we called the Congregational Caregivers Committee. And it was basically a committee that worked with the conference pastor. So the first conference pastor was Herb Kopp. And for Manitoba, that is. Other provinces had conference pastors. Mm-hmm. We had this committee that basically took care of congregational needs or requests for, theological direction or ethical direction or pastoral care. And we would respond to these needs. We would also, have a congregational caregivers or a deacon, I think we call it Ministers and Deacons Conference every year. Mm-hmm. Where we bring in somebody to address issues that pastors were facing. So I was the chair of that. And, I loved my ministry, doing that, working with the team to address issues and working with our conference pastor. So this conference pastor came to his retirement age and decided that I would make a good conference pastor, next conference pastor. I remember the lunch that I had with him, and I laughed at him. He said, you've got to be kidding. You are so funny. I did not see myself in that role at all, in this role.
And yet here you are.
And here
amazing.
So maybe I do listen once in a while.
Just takes a little while to get there, right? So, you've been here a long time, and the thing I don't think I mentioned right off the hop is that you're down to your last few days, you're down to your last couple of weeks in this role, and that's an 11-year stint. Now, you've probably seen a lot of change nationally, locally, you name it, but I can also imagine you've got quite a few stories. Now, I told you I didn't want you to you're not going to, we won't bring up anyone's name, or this is all... We'll keep everything positive, because I know, like in any role, in any job, there's ups and downs. You're going to face conflict and you're going to face your share of troubles. But you must have some stories of victories, large and small, and just moments of real fulfillment. Is there one or two that come to mind? I also like to think of, dozens and dozens of great stories from the road, because you've probably been, as far north as you can get to the other side of the province as well. So anything come to mind that you might share?
Yeah, my greatest stories, they're all confidential.
Yeah.
But my greatest stories are always stories where I see pastors who have been wounded or who have gone through difficult either personal situations or other situations with the church or with their boards that were really hard to deal with. And I was able to come alongside them through those times and, along with many others as well. But I was one of those who was able to see them come through those times and, see them either find another ministry or to find renewal within that ministry and to see them get them back on their feet again. Mm-hmm. You see, I made a lot of mistakes in as I look back, there are decisions that I made rashly or places where I had to go back and ask for forgiveness. Mm-hmm. And so I know that people gave me a chance, and I know that God worked with me to bring me back. And so that has always been high on my priority list, to see people, especially ministers, that I know they have a heart for God. I know that God has given them great gifts and skills for ministry, and to see them put those back into practice in a new ministry or in existing ministries, those have been my highlights.
Redemption and rehabilitation and picking up the pieces and moving on is...
There you go. Redemption, that's the ability to see how God can use at our worst moments, even our worst failures, and turn them around and make them into something beautiful for Him in service of other people.
You spent quite a bit of time in the last few years really learning about conflict resolution, practicing, and becoming a teacher in that area yourself. Are there a few things you could say about what drew you to that and where you see that having a lasting impact even as you leave here?
Absolutely. I used to naively think that because I was a middle child, in a large family, that, I was really good at conflict resolution and,
a born mediator, right? Right there in the middle of other kids.
Let me tell you, there are no born mediators. Boy, it's a huge field where you need lots of skill. So I found early on, especially in when pastors came to ask me to help them resolve or transform conflicts, and for advice in conflicted relationships, I realized that I was going to need a lot of help. So I partnered with the Canadian Institute for Conflict Resolution in Ottawa and took their main course on what it actually means to be, they call it a third-party neutral, but someone to intervene in a helpful way where you don't take sides, where you don't give answers, but where you help guide people towards resolving their own conflicts.
So in the 11 plus years, you've seen a lot of change. You've probably seen changes to the landscape, maybe forms of worship. Who knows? I mean, I certainly would think that the MB Church in Manitoba looks considerably different than it did the day you started. What do you notice as some of the biggest changes?
I've noticed the expectations on pastors have ramped up.
Oh, really?
Yes. I would say radically different expectations for pastors than when I started. I think when I started ministry here in Manitoba, there was much more of an emphasis on the community discernment, for example, on the church, providing the vision, and the pastor, kind of being the main preacher, teacher, and counselor and visitation. Now the emphasis is much more on the pastor, at least the lead pastor, but I think associates as well, as being in addition to being the shepherd, to also being the strategist, the guide, the one who can help the congregation hear God and pursue its mission.
Are the expectations too high, or is that where we should be?
I would be the first to say that expectations for pastors are completely unrealistic.
Right. Mm-hmm.
If you add up all the expectations of a congregation for a pastor, and often, the job descriptions reflect those unrealistic expectations. I mean, I saw one job description that was 3 single-spaced pages long. That is an unrealistic job description.
Of course. And you know what? I'm sure most, if not all of those pastors are pastors in the neighborhood and pastors in the community when they leave the church and go back to, go back home, just in the way you described your life back in Niagara Falls, and that the expectations being as high as they are, in the sense that you're continually giving and perhaps not meeting them. You must see a lot of pastor burnout these years, or in most recently.
I'm amazed, actually, that I don't see more of it. I mean, yes, I've walked with some pastors through burnout and then back, and I have to say churches have recognized their role in in overworking pastors. I think it's also a pastoral responsibility to recognize our own boundaries. And that's a very difficult thing, because ministry is this wonderful array of incredible opportunities to get involved in all kinds of ministry within the church and in the community, in people's lives. And so knowing what you're good at, good self-awareness, knowing what your boundaries are, is extremely important for a pastor.
So if we were to assume that we're not going to change those expectations anytime soon, it would be nice if we could, but if that isn't the case, what other things can you recommend, or what other things should a pastor do or a church do for their pastor to curb this and to give them relief and respite when needed?
Well, I was one of the authors of the sabbatical policy, so putting a sabbatical policy, especially for lead pastors, in place where they can recharge and refresh after a certain amount of years, that helps everyone. It helps the pastor and their family, but it also helps the church, because you have a revived pastor who can minister in their strength rather than just in their weakness. I'm a strong advocate for that. I'm a strong advocate for a continuing education program, however that looks. And I realize that pastors often think, one more thing to do.
Yeah, more homework, more assignments.
Exactly. Yeah. So churches need to make it easy for pastors to get time off. Just imagine being with a congregation, which is this large family, tending this large family, sometimes upwards of 500 people, with all their diverse needs, and managing that whole thing. 53 weeks, Sundays a year, nonstop, without breaks. Sure, they have vacation, and even on vacation, the church goes with you. You take it with you. We have so many gifted, wonderful pastors. All I can encourage churches to do is make sure that your pastors are well looked after, that they have people in the church who walk with them and not just hold them accountable, even though that's important, but also support them and ask them, how is it with their souls?
Yeah, that pastor's making a huge investment in the church. It's only right, it's only fair for the church to make the same type of investment in the lives of the pastor. I know I'm also thinking that not only is a sabbatical and times of rest important for the health of the church family, but for that pastor's family, because now mom or dad can get, a break and the rest they need and time to focus on them and the development of what's happening under their roof, because that I'm sure that suffers on many an occasion. So it's an important thing to recognize and to embrace sabbatical.
Yeah, our salvation, I certainly didn't do everything right in balancing ministry and family life, but one thing we did well is we took a family day off. And when the kids were in school, obviously it's hard to get a day off with, a total day off with them. But we took regular vacations. I took a day off where both Heidi and I were off together. So building also the sabbatical principle in weekly is extremely important.
You had bounced all over the world as a younger guy, and then to be settled in Winnipeg for as long as you have, I can imagine it sometimes must be somewhat isolating or challenging. You must have opportunity to travel and to go places, right? Is that a part of your family dynamic now?
Yeah, once we were able to afford it. When the kids were out of school, etc. So this was a later thing in life. When the kids were at home, we took a family vacation. Heidi had her family in Ontario. My family was in Colorado at that time. So we'd go, one year each each way.
Certain obligations and certain, you just felt to go visit family was the way to go. And plus, it's probably a little more economical at that stage in your life as well.
Yeah. And it was good for the kids.
Yeah, they enjoyed it. I mean, my kids love to go see grandparents. And
hiking in the mountains in the Rockies was great, and going to the cottage in Ontario was great. So
you bet.
Yeah, we had good family vacation times. Later in life, Heidi and I decided that we would prioritize taking a week, a year to fly somewhere
nice.
Nice, exactly.
Yeah, exactly. It's nice and warm.
Nice and warm. And and Heidi would always say that, it's like having a whole week where we can date.
Yeah.
And so she would look forward to
a whole week. I mean, if I had a whole hour to date, I think I'd be doing all right now.
Yeah.
That's
made
amazing.
Our kids
so good.
Made our kids jealous for sure.
So good. And now you were talking about sabbatical. Now I think you've had 2 in your tenure, right? You've been on 2 sabbaticals. Most recently, just a year or so ago, you came back from one. Now, this is some, we've had some past discussion about some of your adventures and sabbatical, and I would love to hear some of the things you've done in that time away from the ministry, or away from your work, at least.
Well, of course, according to sabbatical policy, I had an educational component.
Right. Yeah.
And that was very good. It was good to just be able to study without any other responsibilities. And I guess this is why I'm so adamant about the importance of sabbaticals. I never got sabbaticals when I was working. Once I had to take a leave, and the church was very generous with granting me a leave. But it was as conference pastor that I wanted to model that we need to recharge in this way. And so my first sabbatical, I decided to join a historic pilgrimage route in Europe. I grew up in Europe. Heidi and I returned to visit Europe, and part of my time there, Heidi flew home and I stayed there. And in my entire life, I had never been completely on my own. And I wanted to experience what it meant to walk with only God. I took no cell phone, no means of communication. I had a backpack on my back, and I went from in the back country of France through the Alps, and basically walked alone for 9 days.
Unbelievable.
It was unbelievable. It was a little scary at first. Am I going to be able to do this? But wow, God is a great companion, and we had fantastic times.
Wow. And so any enlightenments, anything that sort of came to you in that time that were unexpected, or maybe what you were seeking along that journey?
Well, actually, what happened was I realized that walking with God is enough. Now, naturally, I'm married, I have kids, and intensely love my family and all the rich array of relationships that I have. And yet, I realized that my best friend and most intimate companion is God, and God never leaves you. He's always with you, and God is enough.
God is enough.
God is enough.
I'm going to let our listeners know a few things about Keith Poysti. Some might, but many may not. Keith Poysti rides a motorcycle. You still ride a motorcycle?
I still ride a venture bike.
And if you recently, one of your sons also purchased a motorcycle, is that correct? You did this sort of together. How does that work?
Yeah, what happened is I grew up riding motorcycles, and then when my son was born, he's our oldest.
Yeah.
I had a little accident with my motorcycle.
Okay.
And decided that I would put it away for the sake of raising my family. I didn't want to leave Heidi to parent alone.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
And so instead I got some dirt bikes and stuff like that. But so Nathan learned to ride. And then now Nathan's an adult. He's a DNA technologist at the Health Sciences Center. And he decided that he wanted to buy a motorcycle. And so,
not without me, Keith says.
So he says, Dad, can you come and help me buy this motorcycle and try it out? And I don't have my license. And so I said, sure. And I drove it home for him because he bought it, a little Ninja, Kawasaki Ninja. And I enjoyed it so much. At the end, he says, Dad, now you're going to have to buy one too. Wow. The rest is history.
Yeah. And we won't have time for this today, but the next time we record, you could tell us the odyssey of how you narrowly escaped membership of the Hells Angels and how that changed your life for the better, and then back around for,
Absolutely.
But that's for another day, and that this is all just fictional friends. He hasn't never really been a part of the Hells Angels, and if he was part of the gang, I don't know if he'd want to share that. Still a fan of music, right? So what's in your playlist these days? And please feel free to share guilty pleasures, the types of things you think maybe aren't progressive rock, but are...
Well, I'm an audiophile, which means that I build my own amplifiers and speakers, my own sound system. I stream all my music at home because I love music, and I use it to kind of not escape, but to relax and to enjoy just the beautiful sounds that people make. So two of my great icons, I don't like all of their music, but I just love the depth and profundity of their music. David Bowie and Leonard Cohen. Leonard Cohen just died.
Two incredible poets and artists lost just this year. We're coming close to a year now for Bowie.
Exactly. Yeah. And so those are two, and the sound, there's also the sound quality of their offerings is incredible. So, and, I go to used CD stores for fun occasionally, and I just prowl through. So I like a lot of instrumental, electronica, and, all kinds of
stuff. And sometimes on the way to Thai food, we listen to Metallica. That's how it goes.
There we go. Yeah. And I can tell you that the person who got me into Metallica is actually the... wife of our executive director.
Yeah, that's one of the very Anna De Silva, who's once you meet her and see her, that must be a Metallica fan. Right? Just like we thought you were a Hells Angel member. I mean, that's probably the furthest thing from your mind when you meet her. But there's so much eclectic music out there, so many different styles. I'm really drawn to some pop artists these days like Sia, who's doing some incredible stuff. But I do think that without David Bowie, Leonard Cohen, and the likes, these incredible artists who were paving the way for the freedom of expression and sound that we're hearing today, then we wouldn't be able to enjoy that music that fills the airwaves today. Bowie especially, so eclectic and a real chameleon with style and sound.
On the Christian scene, Steve Bell is a friend of mine. Not that we get together very often, but he has come and sung at our pastor's retreat.
You're releasing a duet album next year. Is that true or false? Yeah.
But you talk about creative, and him and his band, Gilles Fournier and Company, with the Winnipeg Symphony.
I've had the good fortune of hearing him and learning under him in recent years, and an incredible poet, songwriter, and theologically connected in the sense that it runs through every melody and every lyric in his pieces. It's really good.
And a great guy.
Absolutely. On top of all of that. Yeah.
So his sister, Faith, is actually the wife of a pastor, Randall Cron, up in Flin Flon, and they have a church up in Flin Flon. And so Faith and Steve Bell sang a duet together at one of our retreats. It was just beautiful.
Fantastic. We're going to miss you at the retreats, and I think I think you should have like a long-standing invitation to just keep coming back to the retreats. So I'll see if we can write that into some sort of policy, and I'll talk to the boss.
Well, here's a promo for next retreat.
Yes.
In 2017, Heidi and I have been invited to come and visit, and I'll have one speaking opportunity.
And Keith is entirely under the impression that that's only for 2017. I mean, I was completely honest about trying to get him back year after year after year. So we'll soon wrap things up here, but you are also an athlete, and you're still athletically involved. You play what, soccer?
I was playing indoor soccer last year, yes.
And he is a grandparent. You have 3 grandchildren, am I right? I missed one. Yeah, and one of your sons was also recently married. So
yes,
all kinds of things happening.
Yes.
And in a more, I don't even know how to begin on this one, but in the last year, you've been, as a family, put through the ringer. You've been on the roller coaster of life, and you've faced all kinds of issues, and God has brought you through. And I think that this couldn't be a better story for a man who's about to make, another momentous change in this stage of his career, and leave this 11-year journey behind you. But God's got you in a pretty fantastic place right now, and I'm just grateful for how things have turned out, and for just the miracles that's happened, even in the more recent year. And I don't know if you want to say anything about that, but those who know you will know those things. And one other thing that I will say, and I'm being I'm being sincere. I've only known you a few years, but I'm so grateful for the impact you've had in my life personally. It's been an incredible working and personal relationship that I hope continues. I know it will. But words can't express. I can't put into words how much we at the conference will miss you when you're gone. And that's about all I know how to say about that. I mean, it's going to stink, but it's going to be so great for you to be able to keep moving on. Do you have anything planned, or are you leaving things in the open? What can you share about what you'll do when you leave here in a couple of weeks' time?
Well, one thing that Heidi and I have agreed that, with the events of last year where Heidi was faced with a pancreatic tumor and had it removed by an operation, as well as 3/4 of her pancreas, we're so grateful that it was precancerous and that she has a good prognosis ahead of her. But both of us know that we're going to need a break time where we just decompress from 11 years of ministry, decompress from what happened in the last year, support our family who are also going through all the normal stuff of growing families. So we're going to take time just to decompress and allow God's healing to fill our lives. So I really do not have any plans as far as vocational aspirations. And just as in the past, we've always leaned on God to guide us. We'll be doing that in this great adventure ahead of us. So we're in our good days. We're very confident and very happy and very much looking forward. I would be remiss if I didn't say we had some anxious moments as well. We give them up to God. We ask for God's help daily in our future orientation, and we're just very confident that God will give us what we need each day of our life.
God provides. God is good. We're going to miss you. And you're really not going anywhere, at least not right now. I mean, for the friends that you've made across Manitoba and elsewhere, you'll still make yourself available for coffee and to be in relationship. Things may be different. You won't be the conference pastor, but you're not going all that far. You'll be able to be in touch.
Absolutely. We feel like we're leaving this ministry in capable hands. Gerald Dick has already begun, and I just see this as a huge time of opportunity for the Mennonite Brethren Church in Manitoba. There's a new hunger for God and for God to lead and guide in His mission. I think there's such a good atmosphere in the churches, and I am going to personally grieve the same intensity of relationships, which I know will not be there, but I am available. I will be not hiding anywhere.
Right.
Most definitely will continue to have many friendships throughout the denomination.
Well, thank you for 11 plus years. Thanks for being our pastor. Thanks for being our friend. Thank you for being my friend. And I appreciate you taking the time to talk to us today.
And thank you, Carson. It's been a joy.
And we're back. Just for those of you following at home, we've done a little research on the scarf tangled in the spoke story.
Isadora.
And it looks like we didn't have all the facts, but now we do. Sarah, can you share a little more about that?
Yes, I can. Isadora Duncan was a dancer born in 1877, but she died a very tragic death in 1927 when she wore a lovely silk scarf in an open-air car with open exposed spokes, and the scarf got tangled, and very sad and tragic things ensued. So
sure,
if you were wondering...
I can only imagine.
What the story was, that's the story.
I think what I'm most concerned about here, though, is although it is tragic, that Carla, in how she reported it, neglected so many of those details. Now, I'm not questioning her abilities as a reporter, but what I'm really getting at here is this a ruse? Is this her way of throwing off that whole... I'm not really a superhero reporter thing. Do you think she was just trying to throw us off?
Did she purposefully say that, she was a motorcycle accident?
Yeah, I'm wondering if this was just a way to throw us off. So I'm going to give you one more chance to fess up. Are you or are you not a superhero under the secret identity of a day-to-day reporter?
I can neither confirm nor deny this fact.
Okay, we're going to leave it at that. Okay, so we're just about done here for today. Carla, I know you are very busy. Do you want to let us know what's going on at the Herald?
Though it's only the beginning of December, we are already busily in process getting your January-February issue together. This issue is going to focus on the Holy Spirit, and it will also include the Week of Prayer bulletin. I'm not sure, bulletin, pamphlet, leaflet...
whatever that is.
I'm not sure what kind of word we're going to use. This is the third year that we've been doing this as part of the Canadian Conference of Mennonite Brethren Churches, producing a 7-day devotional to call people to pray and reflect together at the beginning of the new year. This can be used individually in your personal devotions, as small groups, if they want to spend an intentional week together, or one evening in which they go through it all in one evening. The possibilities are endless. We're inviting people to engage with it somehow in their churches and also on social media. We'll have a hashtag. We'll have some questions that we're going to throw out there to hear how are you engaging with this material? How are you hearing the Holy Spirit speak to you? Share your insights. Share your tips on what are your prayer practices. We'd love to hear from people of how God is speaking to them and how they're using this material.
So you really want to push the online social media component to this. You'll have the print publication that you can use, but we want to hear from our churches, our congregations, and anybody who's using this resource.
We would love to hear from you.
Sarah, we're going to close the show with I've Heard. That's the last track on your Come Morning EP, or rather
right.
Bread We Breaks
yeah.
EP. And I wondered if maybe you could just give us a bit of insight on that song.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that song took us by surprise a little bit because we had picked the set for the EP and the songs we wanted to do. So we got together one day it took us so long to work through all those songs after they were initially written. But we got together to work on them for a day. And then Colin Clausen, who used to be a co-host on this podcast.
He is dearly missed.
Yeah. He brought a new song that he had written to us, and we played it on his guitar, and it was I've Heard in an early form, and we just immediately really liked it and latched onto it, and the lyrics and the melody and the we had a lot of fun building instrumentals around it and just working on the sound for it. So we immediately just swapped it out with a song that will rest until another day and worked on this one instead.
Cool. Whose voice am I hearing on that track? Because it's not yours.
That's right. It's Ben Lowen. He's a good friend and he's been part of the band from the beginning. And those are his rich, dark tones that will be coursing through the airwaves any moment now.
So we're going to go out with I've Heard by Bread We Break, but before we do, just want to remind you that you've been listening to the Multiply podcast. Thank you so much for doing so. And this is a partnership between MBCM, Mennonite Brethren Church of Manitoba, MB Mission, and the MB Herald. Merry Christmas. Hope you have a fantastic final month of 2016, and we'll be back with new episodes in the new year. Cheers.
Breaking through the discord, and I've heard you make the crooked path straight, and I've heard there's healing power in your Jesus, in the name of Jesus, so I'll trade my life for your kingdom. Oh, come restore this heart of mine, open up my